Welcome to Venice Views. I'm Pam Johnson, Marketing and Communications Officer for the City of Venice, and today we're bringing you another Venice, a snapshot in time, partially funded by Visit Florida. We're so happy that we have these historical videos to share with you, and today we're going to talk to the Curry family. Directly behind me is the house that Claude Curry built back in the turn of the century. So we're very happy to meet their descendants today and talk about what life was like back in those early days in a place called Venice, but as you'll learn later, is now called Nokomis. Well, I'm here now with Phyllis Curry and her daughter Rebecca Curry Rabinowitz, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Curry family. Their roots go back a long, long ways, but in America they go back to the Revolutionary War. Tell us about that, Phyllis.
Okay. They originally were the Curry side you're talking
Yes.
about, not the Knights. Okay, they're an old Scottish family, and they'd settled in a little town. One branch settled in a little town called Duns, D-U-N-S, in just over the border between Scotland and Ireland. Okay, and that was the group that came here, and. First one came in the 1700s and settled in South Carolina, and they did very well. Then the next one came. That group went back to Scotland, and then a son came back too. But the time they'd settled pretty well before the Revolutionary War. Anyway, George Washington arrived about the same time, and he was a surveyor, and the first Curry here that actually settled in the New World was also a surveyor, so they could pick the good land and everything like that. And there again, they did very well again. And then when the Revolutionary War broke out, five of the sons were they were loyalists. And back then, if you even said, well, let's talk about it, that was it, you're gone. And so they had moved first to Florida because it was British at that time, and then eventually went over to the Bahamas, Green Turtle Key, and in that area. And they raised several generations there. And then the next group came over to and settled in Key West. And they were spongers, and of course they were seafaring too, and fishers and so on. And the one that finally arrived in this area was Captain John Curry. And up in Bradenton now there are 4 or 5 of the Curry houses that were built prior to the Civil War, and they've been restored. And then getting closer to this family, Charles Oliver, he married a knight. That's how that happened. Okay, Francis Victoria Knight, right? And they moved down. In the meantime, the Knights had come here because they were cattlemen, and they needed more land and so on. So they Granddad Curry was the son of Charles Oliver, and the Knight girl, and he had 2 brothers, Frank Curry, and who was quite an entrepreneur in this area, and Charles Samuel. Okay, and this is our immediate family. And then, of course, Claude married Mabel Wilson, and there, as I said, I think earlier, there are a lot of Wilsons in Sarasota and so on, and she was born actually in Waiaka on the river. And went back there to be, and she was married there too. And so Manoah had, and Claude Theodore, they had 10 children, 7 rowdy boys and 3 girls. And we're descendant to Richard, her daddy.
The first Knights that came here that was Jesse Knight,
Jesse, yeah.
And Frances, who married Charles Curry.
Yeah.
That was their daughter.
Yeah, one of the daughters.
They set up a home here.
Uh-huh.
And where was that?
The first one, when they crossed the, when the Knights crossed at Chayket Creek, and of course you've heard the story of that.
We'd like to hear it again.
Okay, they had, was like the Old West, covered wagons and all that sort of thing. They brought 300 head of cattle along with them, and mules and so on. And one of the mules balked crossing the creek there, but where the Legacy Trail crosses now. Okay, there was a railroad crossing there too. Not then, later. And anyway, they. When they balked, and Jesse said to one of the boys, "Take that cowhide and kind of shake it." Well, he did with a lot of enthusiasm, and they balked, and everything went in the thing. So he named it Chayket Creek. Yeah, it was. It had another name, Rocky Creek or something, before that. But that was their first home was right there, on right where the Legacy Trail crosses.
It would be just a little bit northeast of here, or northwest of here, and just about where the Legacy Trail crosses Chayket Creek.
So it would be in the Nokomis side?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, it's on the bay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's where Francis probably lived, I would guess.
Oh, yes,
when Charles
raised
came.
their children and so on. Yeah.
Okay, so then when Francis and Charles got married, where did they build their home?
On Curry Creek.
on Curry Creek. Now, is that the place in the Curry Creek Preserve? There's a foundation there. Is that it?
I believe the foundation is still there.
Yeah.
But that's the place then,
It
where
was
they lived.
what is now called Albee Farm Road,
Yes.
Yeah.
and it's where Curry Creek
Solid
crosses
Creek, yeah.
Albee Farm Road on the south side.
So
Southeast side.
if somebody wanted to go today to see Curry Creek Preserve, a wonderful, beautiful place that's just like as natural as it was when the Currys came here, that's where they would see where their home was.
Yeah.
Yes.
The newspaper put, and the archives kind of picked it up for a while, that they said A.Y. Reed lived there, but he didn't.
Oh, he did it. Where did he live?
He lived, but you know where Kimmel Lumber is?
Yes.
Okay, about there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just down the street here.
Yeah.
Okay, so how many children did this is Charles and Francis have?
They had,
Yeah, the 3 boys, but I don't know if they had any girls. I don't know that.
yeah, Mabel.
Mabel. So
Yeah,
there
they
were
had a
4 of
sister.
them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The other Mabel.
The other Mabel. Nana's name was Mabel too.
Yes. Oh,
But,
yes.
Yeah.
So they raised their children there near Curry Creek. And what did he do? Was he a farmer as well? Did he do the raise cattle and that?
Talking
with
just
the Knights?
Jesse?
Charles.
Charles.
Mhm.
Yeah, mostly a farmer, yeah, raised groves and so on. And everybody had cows. Yeah, we do even.
Yes.
So it's just sort of the thing to do, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
It was the farming
Yeah.
community at that time.
Yeah.
And there weren't very many neighbors, I don't suppose. Can you all tell me how did they live? There must have been a lot of mosquitoes and must have been very hot in the summer without air conditioning.
My name is Ted Curry. My father was named Milton Curry, and he was born in that room right there. And his father was Claude Curry. Claude and Mabel Curry did most of the raising of 10 kids right in this house, and most of them were born there. And as a kid, we used to come here several times a year to visit, and I remember this old house is very much a part of my childhood. Right across there was a huge sinkhole that's filled in now, big eucalyptus trees. They were just wonderful for carving, hearts and names in. And this porch here, I remember Claude knitting the nets that he used to use or still would use to cast over the mullet, and that would be part of the Thanksgiving dinners. They would barbecue these mullet and have big Thanksgiving dinners. Another dinner was what they call swamp cabbage or palm cabbage. That's the heart of a palm tree, just like these palm trees right here. When the pioneers were first here, dinner was right there very easily. You never starved in Florida. A lot of protein and a lot of vegetables. Some of the things I remember from this old house, there was this very warm feeling. Grandfather was this dynamic, large man that seemed 12 feet tall, but was over 6 foot. And Manaw, that was the grandmother's name, Mabel, his wife. She was this little woman, and she baked bread. One time I remember this was a sign of her approval and that you had been blessed by grandmother. She would make bread, just throwing in flour and sugar and this and that. And when it came out of the oven, she would cut off the heel, slather it with butter, sprinkle it with sugar, and then say, "Take this out in the yard and eat it." And if you were blessed with that, you know that you had made it as a grandchild. So it seems like I meet cousins around town that I didn't even know I had.
Well, one of the things they did was they used the prevailing winds. The houses were built, we lived with no air conditioning. Our house was on the bay, and we would use an occasional fan, and it might be a little warmer now today, but I don't remember ever sweating too bad. And because the winds, we had good windows, and the winds came through the house. This house, when it did get electricity, has a big fan in the attic. And when that fan's turned on, you can stand downstairs at the bottom, and the wind just whips right through the house.
And they're up off the ground too.
Yeah.
For circulation.
Oh, for circulation. And I always thought perhaps it was for flooding, because I know that, water does come up sometimes. Not here.
No, mostly just for the circulation.
Very interesting. So what how did they educate their children?
At first the night children were homeschooled, and they all had a pretty good education. Even coming from way back there, and anybody that came into the area was a Methodist, whether they wanted to be or not, because Jesse was a Methodist minister, and his wife taught the children, and they built the first schools and the first church. They were very religious. Religion and that sort of thing was very important to them. And same with Manaw and Granddad. And Manaw had a lot of tragedies happen to her, but she had such strong faith that she pulled right through it, everything. And she lived, I was there when she died, and she just went to sleep, and she was almost 102.
Oh my goodness, that's
and
amazing.
Just as alert as could be.
So she was just really made of sturdy stuff.
Right, she was. Yeah.
Well, they had to be, I think
so, yeah.
Come to a wilderness and live like they had to live here. There were other places that were a lot easier to live in.
I am the granddaughter of Claude and Mabel Curry. My father was Richard Curry, and my mother is Phyllis Curry. Probably although there are very many favorite moments in this house, sneaking upstairs and whatnot and plunking on Manaw's piano, which I have now, would be the warm feeling I got when I got to her porch. And she was just a little tiny lady, and she'd say, "Well, hey there, honey," and she'd give us a big old hug. And then the other memory I'd like to share is when she turned 100. I asked her, I said, "How did you do it?" I said, "You had 10 children, 7 of them were strong-willed Curry boys." And she said, "Well, I had a strong faith. I have a strong faith. And secondly, if I have a situation come up, I say, well, what can I do about it today? And I do what I can, and then I let it go." And she was one of the happiest persons I've ever known in my whole life.
That's true. And Manaw was due to go with an aunt to Europe to study music. And I don't know whether the rest mentioned it, but you could hear her piano all the time. And that's not the original piano. Rebecca has it. She had it restored.
Oh, wonderful.
And there was always music and laughter in this house.
I'm Roxy Curry. I was married to Granddad Curry's oldest grandson, and my husband was born right there in the front bedroom, and my mind goes blank.
What's your husband's name? What was your husband's name?
Clyde.
Clyde?
Clyde Augustus.
And he was born here.
Yeah, in the front
He
bedroom
was
there.
Claude's. He was Claude's.
He was what?
Claude's child. Claude's son.
Grandson.
He was a child of the oldest child.
Carl's son.
Yeah, and we were married real young, and in fact I was 15, he was 18. I had lived in Tennessee and I just moved down here, and he was in the 3 C's, and when he got out we met, and
an excellent carpenter.
And we were married about 6 months later. We had 5 children, a happy marriage. My husband, his name was Clyde, he bought the garage from Granddad. And Granddad and Clyde took the material and went down on the corner, which we'd bought, 2.5 acres, and built us a house. And we lived down there for 13 years. But I could hear Mano playing the piano through the grove at night.
Was she a good musician?
Oh, Lord.
She loved to play the piano. And one time Granddad went to Texas to see his sister, and Mano could stay up a little later. And I'd hear that piano just working. And so anyway, it's been a long, happy life.
What kind of music did she like to play?
Huh?
What kind of music did your...
You know, I really don't remember what she played, but she played real good, and I'm sure a lot of it was church music, because the family would gather around.
When he was gone.
The family would gather around the piano after our Thanksgiving dinners and sing.
Mano's family, her father was one of Florida's first senators.
Oh, he was. Do you remember his name? It was Wilson, but...
Augustus Marion Wilson.
Okay.
And he was also in charge of Indian affairs.
Oh,
he would ride his horse down into the Everglades, and we were told he was one of the few white men, that were allowed to come in there. Yeah.
Fascinating.
And the Wilsons, of course, are mostly in Sarasota now. Mm-hmm. And they all became doctors and lawyers and so on.
And many of them were from the Scottish families, weren't they, the Wilsons?
Wilsons, yeah. His name was James Wilson. James Wesley Wilson. He came from Scotland.
Well, here I have some pictures that you might find interesting. This is Alex Kelso, Milton Curry, Roland Curry, an unknown person, Roberta Clark, Mary Moore, and Susie Mitchell. And Carl Curry is the bus driver.
He was the bus driver, and his sister was a teacher, and Granddad was on the school board. They had to behave.
So education was very important to the
Very
Currys,
important.
it appears.
Religion and education.
Yes. And so here's another one from the next year, which is, this one's Roland Curry, Milton Curry, Alex Kelso, Roberta Clark, Robert Montgomery, Carl Curry, the bus driver. Now, these were all Carl's children, these Currys here? Or
that would be...
Roland Milton?
No, Roland was Charles Samuels, right?
Yeah.
And Milton?
And Milton was Claude Theodore's
son.
Okay.
Yeah. They would be... when they finished, way back then, when they finished high school, no, before they finished the grade school, they had to go to Sarasota. They didn't have a high school down here. And then they did do a high school. It was all in the same building in Nokomis. And yeah, that's where the Old Timers Picnic is held now.
So this says, in 1927, 2 symmetrical wings were added to the original 2-room Nokomis School for white students on Nipano Trail to accommodate a junior high enrollment. Well, that school's
That's when
gone.
Milton was principal.
Is that school gone, or is that the one?
The building, part of the building's still there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's now a community center or something. And then we have the Old Timers Picnics on the school ground.
Okay. Is that where the old Nokomis School was?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's a big Curry clan.
Okay.
So, let's see if I can, the Curry family seated left to right, grandmother Frances Victoria Knight
She
Curry.
was still alive when I got down here.
And she was the wife of Charles Curry. And Mabel Wilson, who was the wife of Claude Curry, that's your minnow.
Yeah, Claude Curry, yeah, okay.
And then standing is Gertrude Bear Curry, the wife of Frank Curry, and Mabel Curry Wester,
Holding a baby, of course.
and Clarabelle Bear Curry, who was Charles Curry's wife.
Charles Samuel.
Charles Samuels, okay. And Mina Bear Dunn, who was Walter Dunn's wife. And then standing, I guess, is Claude Curry, Walter Dunn, Frank Curry, and Charles Curry. And those are the people that pretty much made up this community, I guess, for a while.
That was
there.
about it.
When I was fascinated to read, I believe it was George Heigel's, who was Nemo, the Nemo Chronicles.
Yeah.
And because all these people are mentioned, I guess they were getting older in those days when he was writing. But all their families, they were always mentioned in his wonderful chronicles, and he would even allude to, somebody's going to pop the question next week, and you would wonder, okay, who's going to propose to whom?
Those were from the newspaper.
Thank you both for being with us today, and we'll look forward to talking to you again about the Curry family and the history of this whole area. Thanks so much for being with us here today, and I hope you'll join us next month when we bring you part 2 of this interview with the Curry family. They're a delightful family, and they have so many interesting stories about their history, which is our history. See you next month when we bring you more Venice Views.